It's an honor to warmly welcome Uganda's Stella Nyanzi. Woo! I should say that. Hello, Stella. You're on camera now. You're on camera. You already started taking notes. I'm
Hi,
not sure.
Eddie. It's wonderful to be here, and
And you
I'm
also,
rolling away.
yeah. Let's
I'm
have you
being
short.
youthful.
That's good. It's great to have you here. It's great to have you with us here.
It's wonderful to be here at
Yeah.
the 77%.
Yeah.
I feel a lot more youthful already, and
Yeah.
I believe in that introduction that said that the young people are the way to go.
Yeah.
The
Totally.
future for the world, really, not just
Totally.
Africa.
You believe in that. There's also one thing you strongly believe in, that or what I should say, you're totally against, and that's authoritarian governments, right? Or autocrats of any kind. But there seems to be a growing trend of young people seemingly embracing autocracy, saying it's a bit more efficient than democracy. What do you say to these young ones?
I think it's a pity that in 2021, alternative forms of democracy seem to be failing our generation, the adults, but also many young people. Because I think to turn away from hopes in democracy or democratization and to turn towards authoritarianism is to die as a people, is to die as people who believe in freedom and the right to live as free beings. Authoritarian regimes, no matter how efficient they may be, are dangerous to personal liberties, to self-expression, to diversity, but also to minorities. And I think that for young generations in Africa, we shouldn't fall for the deceit of dictators, of oppressors, and it doesn't matter how efficient they may seem, that efficiency does not serve the common person. It does not serve the public, and it especially does not serve the poor, who need to rely on a government that's working for all, regardless of status, regardless of power, regardless of class. And the problem with authoritarian regimes is that they serve a small minority of elites. So elitism for me is problematic because it caters to a very small segment of society. It doesn't matter how efficient the system may be.
So it's not about the efficiency for you. Fortunately, there are many like you who are fighting against such regimes. So they want nothing to do with any autocratic leader. But it's coming at a cost, you know. You, of all people, would know that fighting against such regimes is not an easy one. Is it still worth the risk, in your opinion?
Always.
No matter what?
Always. In my language, we have a saying that countries cost lives. And say guliwa mirambo in my language. And it is unfortunate that although we had a history which we should have learned from, we haven't learned that the cost of authoritarianism often is life. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is it worth it? That's a question I ask myself time and time again, especially when I see the cost that people involved in the liberation struggle, in the revolution struggle, in the anti-capitalist struggle have paid, and especially repressive regimes. Is it worth it? I think it is always worth it, right?
Okay. You know, saying it is worth it is what has made a lot of people start talk about you, to say that, okay, so...
Let them talk.
As always, I mean, it's a free world, right? Anyone can give out the opinions. They say you are still pushing for the fight against such regimes, yet you have left your country, currently in Germany, you know, for the safety of your own life. So are you in the moral position to demand others keep fighting in your country when you've left here?
Right. A dead woman cannot do anything for the struggle for liberation.
Exactly.
A dead soldier cannot carry their gun. Thankfully, I believe totally in nonviolence. To flee and be alive and be safe and have a voice and have a platform it's better to stay home, where prison was always knocking at my door, where my life became endangered simply because I spoke out. And speaking out for me is the essence of what I am. to silence myself, to gag myself, to refuse to say particular words simply because prison is looking at me, guns are looking at me, political persecution is looking at me, is to be a dead soldier. I want to be a soldier who is proud because every day I wake up to fight those particular evils that I confront, those ones, patriarchy, homophobia, poverty, like looming poverty in a country endowed with so many natural resources. But to be in a state where I am paralyzed with fear is as bad as to be dead.
So you think you can fight it even better away from home?
Exile for me has created a platform where I can amplify the issues of Ugandans back home that they cannot talk about. And no one will come and say to me, Stella Nyanzi, you are charged with speaking in ways that offend the Chancellor of Germany. The Chancellor of Germany doesn't know me, for crying out loud. And if the Chancellor knew me, they'd probably say, let her talk. Okay? And so I think that exile for me, you know, I keep telling people that retreat is no surrender. And since I'm talking to young people in Africa, I think it's important sometimes for us to know when we should retreat. Retreat does not mean running away from the struggle. Retreat sometimes means rejuvenation, re-strategizing, you know, refueling, healing our wounds because the struggle gets us wounded. Self-care. But thinking about the ways to go forward, because if you ask me, part of the challenges we face in Africa is a staleness that has come into liberation, emancipatory, revolutionary sort of struggles, and we need to breathe some fresh air and renew those particular struggles. And I think the fatigue of fighting against long-term dictatorships, such as the one that we have in Uganda or in Cameroon or in other countries of Africa, sometimes that fatigue is so overwhelming that a person needs. I'm blessed, I'm lucky to have had the opportunity to step away a little. I think I'm much more dangerous. If my tongue was sharp, now it's double.
Okay. I don't know if I want to experience your double, triple tongue.
If you are an oppressor, you will experience that tongue. If you're not, we shall make sweet honey out of our tongues.
Looking forward for the honey part. They say there seems to be this rawness with the way you critique the government. Is that a style that you still want to hold on to? Because some say you've toned down a bit.
Toned down? Excuse me.
Because we know what you used to do, Stella.
What did I used to do?
I mean, we're talking about this rawness. I mean, we saw, you know, in court, the whole issue in court, and when, you know, you were showing some parts, people were like, oh, maybe that was a bit much.
There is an urgency for the struggle. In repressive societies, polite speech has been depoliticized. It has been domesticated. The language of respectability and civility, unfortunately, has been co-opted. And so it's boring. They don't listen to it. Dictators have turned deaf to that language of respectability because that is what they do. And I think that to see a person such as myself, I have a PhD from University of London, for crying out loud. Okay? But to see that I can suddenly take off my clothes and come raw and naked in my truth of oppression and bare my breasts in court, temple of justice, untouchable, and defile the very sanctity of court, is to make a message. People say to me she's insane. And then after saying I'm insane, and I do it again and again and again, if anyone has a mind, they will ask, but why does this woman undress? Why does she undress at the university? And then we begin to have a discussion. Oppressor with the oppressed, the powerful with the powerless. And why? Because the flamboyance rips apart that veneer of normalcy. And I think business as usual has ceased to work in Uganda. And I think for me, Uganda is one of the most repressive states in the world. Perhaps as bad as Russia, if I may.
Okay.
And so, in my opinion, how does one confront Vladimir Putin? How does one confront Yoweri Museveni? How does one confront dictatorship?
We're doing something out of the ordinary.
Using methods that will grab the attention of the dictatorship. Shake it! That is what we do.
Are you still going to use those methods?
They're effective. Poetry that scandalizes a nation. You have 5 seconds, my brother, 5 seconds to say one word. Are you going to say respectability, the civility? No! You said no! And you scream. And then you grab the attention of a whole nation and a continent and they say, she did what?
Yeah.
She called the president.
Yeah.
And then they begin to say, but why did she call the president? And before you know, people are laughing at a whole president. That woman called the president. And we laugh at power. That is undoing, redressing, shattering power, because those that hold power in repressive societies cannot be laughed at. We fear them. And I think part of what we have to do in terms of re-envisioning for young Africans is to kill the fear that dictatorships have created, to stop the silencing, and sometimes just to have these mad, radical ways of engaging is what refuels and invigorates. And people say, if a woman could just undress and stop the whole machinery of TV, radio, and newspapers in Uganda stopped, and they spoke about Stella Nyanzi. Even Duchavela carried a story about Stella Nyanzi, right? Even the BBC and CNN and whoever, they carried a story about Stella Nyanzi. How many professors with polite speech have been captured? And I think for me that it may be insane, but there's a logic to the madness. How do we make abusers of state power stop and listen? It might be having dreadlocks in court.
Okay.
Or having a naked woman in court, or having a naked woman on TV. Pray I keep my clothes on.
I pray you do, at least for this interview.
Pray, my brother, pray.
I will keep praying.
Amen.
You've been talking about the state in Uganda, that you almost seem to paint this picture that almost nothing is working, right? Let me just bring out this report by the UN that was recently, a new report from the United Nations. It has revealed that the situation regarding women's rights, gender-based violence, and FGM, female genital mutilation, has actually improved in many sub-Saharan countries, including in Uganda. Now, it's still a dire situation. We're not saying it's all well and good. But do you see some progress being made? Is that something you can be honest about if you see that?
Right. So, listen. When statistics and quantitative indicators that measure particular performances are given to us, we have to question for whom do these statistics work, okay? If a new hospital has been built, and so they record there were 50 hospitals, now there are 51 hospitals, who has access to the hospital services? Who is getting employed? Okay. Often what happens is those indicators are showing progress that serves the middle class, the elite, those who have access to resources, and those who have access to power. Unfortunately, a number of the quantitative indicators that measure these things that UNFPA measures do not necessarily reflect what is on the ground for the poor, for the marginalized, for those in the opposition, for those in civil society organizations, for those who are dissidents and dissenters who are resisting against a regime. Okay? When UNFPA says that FGM rates have reduced, what does it mean on the ground in terms of changing a culture and a tradition where men still emphasize that for one to be a woman, an adult woman, they still need to be mutilated? If cultures are not addressed intrinsically and social norms are not addressed, and one just counts how many women came to be circumcised, or how many circumcisers reported women being mutilated, without changing the conditions on the ground of oppression that were measured before this, right? What do those indicators mean on the ground? Who is silenced? Who is not represented?
Okay.
And I think for me that part of the problem is when the realities on the ground that are not captured by statistics are ignored because we celebrate the structural, measurable progress indicators. We are missing the pain of the numbers. We are missing the silencing done by numbers. So has there been progress? Of course. Does it matter? Not to my kind of people who cannot access $1 to buy bread. How is hunger measured? When we are told that the poverty indices have gone lower, right? Who is measured? There are people whose poverty cannot even surface. Do you understand me? Building a new school, building a new road does not take care of the ignorance or those who don't have access to even feeder roads that lead to the main road. And so there's always exclusion. And I think part of what I do as an academic is to allow and invite ordinary people outside of classrooms to begin to question these things. For whom does the progress work?
Fair enough question. If you were in the position of power in Uganda and you had to change...
I am in a position of power.
You are, sorry.
I am. Don't exclude my power.
I will not. My bad. Forgive me. If you had one thing to change in Uganda, what would that be?
Museveni. Museveni's regime would end now. So in terms of power and appropriation of power, what I want to do is to take power back to the people and take it away from the dictatorship, take it away from the military, take it away from a small group, a small family, a small tribe. Having Yoweri Museveni, a dictator in power, takes away the power from the people. And so you were talking about authoritarianism. And the counter to that is democracy. I think that we have to start poking holes in these fake democracies such as Uganda. We had an election last year. Was it democratic?
Yeah, I'm assuming you say no.
Of course not. But then the problem is, I mean, you've heard about this hybrid authoritarian democracies or democratic authoritarian regimes. A military man who allows elections to happen year after year after year, and he rigs them. And there's no critique necessarily coming because he has this performance, this sham of rigging elections. Is that authoritarianism or democracy or a bit of both? Right? Very much like UNFPA, very much like all these indicators. For whom does the so-called democracy in Uganda work? And how do we make it work for all of us? So what would I change? Museveni should just go home and rest.
Stella, would you want to be president of Uganda sometime?
If it served the people. If it served the people. If the only way to get Museveni out is to become president, why not? Join me.
So you're ready then?
If the only way to get Museveni out is to sacrifice myself, right? Because I think what presidency needs in Uganda today is sacrifice, total sacrifice. We don't have that. I think what presidency has become, what the executive has become in repressive regimes, is for people to say, the presidency is serving me. Yoweri Museveni had the audacity to go onto TV and say, I'm not serving you guys, I'm not your servant. I serve myself, my children, my grandchildren. The presidency needs a person who says, take me, kill me, sacrifice me, and let the people walk over my body. That is the new sort of presidency we need in Uganda. And in other African dictatorial regimes, we need presidents who will sacrifice their very own selves and their children and their grandchildren. Yoweri Museveni doesn't do that. And if a Ugandan cannot do that, then I will come and be it. Are you telling me to run for presidency?
I mean, if you want to.
I think I don't have 5 years to wait for 2026. I want a revolution today. Today. I don't have time to wait for sham elections. I want the people to join hands and take out the dictatorship. I want to organize young men and young women, old men and old women, infuse the liberation struggle in my country. I want to see change such that power returns to the people. It doesn't have to be me. We need a sacrificial leader. 5 sacrificial leaders, 50 sacrificial leaders, 500 sacrificial leaders, 5,000 Stella Nyanzis thinking about sacrifice for the sake of freedom.
Okay.
So give me 5,000 Stella Nyanzis. Museveni will be out next week.
Okay.
That is what I want to do in exile, my brother. That is what I want to do. So tell Museveni to listen. We are coming for him. We are coming for him. I'm not coming alone. I'm coming with 5,000, 50,000, 500,000, 5 million Ugandans ready to say, we are sacrificing ourselves for freedom. That is the sort of sacrificial, liberatory language we need. It is no longer about me and my children and my grandchildren.
Okay.
It has to be about freedom and liberation.
Now, Stella, it's been lovely so far. I wish we had all the time. There's so much more we could have delved into. But there's a lot of young women out there, young Africans generally, watching you right now who are committed to the struggle also for democracy, for a better, brighter future. What is your message to these young African women out there? This is your camera. I want you to look in this camera and speak to them.
This one?
Yeah, 1 minute max.
Lose the fear. You matter. You can contribute. And just do your part. That's it. Just do your part. Every one of us doing our part. I'm looking for 500,000 Ugandans to topple a dictatorship. So each one of us doing something small, making sanitary pads, baking, leading capacity building classes, building the revolution, driving cars, educating ourselves, healing, taking care of prisoners, speaking out, tweeting, Facebooking. Each one of us doing something. 500,000 Ugandans, 500,000 Africans. Wow! Pam! Boom. And so I think what I'm saying to young people is lose the fear and do your part. You can't do it like Stella Nyanzi. Do it like yourself. Is that good enough?
I think that's fantastic. These are your words.
Yeah, I mean, you come to studio every day, so...
Now, by the way,
you're doing your part.
I'm doing my part.
Good.
Hey, it's been great. Thank you very much for making the time.